what I'd like to do now is call, if I could ask David and Craig to come up. I'm going to briefly introduce them, and they're going to be part of our evening Entrepreneurs Roundtable. And I'd like to tell you just a little bit about each of them, and then, sure. What were you? To change this camera. So let me introduce David and Craig. So for those that could stay this evening from 5:30 to 8:30, we're going to have a roundtable with 3 PACE alumni entrepreneurs. And as a note, I'm also a PACE alumni and was an entrepreneur. I started several companies, a .com company when I was a graduate student in Australia, and a traditional company, Annapolis Maritime in New York, before doing a lot of other things. I don't have a traditional academic background. I started on Wall Street and worked for a government contractor in about 26 countries and did a number of other things, took off and went sailing for a few years, so more of an entrepreneur than a traditional academic. But let me introduce David and Craig, 2 of the 3 PACE alumni entrepreneurs that are going to participate in the roundtable tonight. So David co-founded Elite Daily in 2012, as I mentioned, while a PACE student, to be the voice of Generation Y. And the site now reaches 40 million people a month. The company has a staff of 37 full-time employees, all within the ages of 19 to 26, and more than 2,000 contributors worldwide. Again, that's elitedaily.com. Craig Tashman is a PACE alum. He attended our Pleasantville campus. For those that don't know, we have a campus, campuses rather in Manhattan, mainly downtown here, a small center in Midtown Manhattan, and campuses in White Plains, a law school and a graduate school, and undergraduate campuses in Pleasantville and Briarcliff. Craig attended the Pleasantville campus and graduated from the Dyson College of Arts and Sciences. So he co-founded Liquid Text, it's liquidtext.net, in 2012. A young startup, Liquid Text is a multi-touch document manipulation system that gives students and knowledge workers better ways to annotate, navigate, visualize, and understand long, complex documents. And Craig he got himself an internship at IBM's Thomas J. Watson Labs and worked at Microsoft. He went on to RPI to do his master's science degree in computer science and a PhD from Georgia Tech. And my students have to go out and interview entrepreneurs, and one showed me Liquid Text. It was really neat. So here's 2 of the 3 entrepreneurs, just for those that can attend or would like to attend tonight. The third one is Lenny, who graduated and started a company, online furniture discounts, and within 3 years he grew that to $8 million in revenue. Lenny couldn't participate in this portion of the day because of prior commitments. But what I'd like to do is to give David and Craig the opportunity to ask some questions. And I think what's neat about the 3 companies, not only obviously are they all PACE alumni, but they're all at very different stages. So why don't I open it up? David, would you like to start?
Sure. Basically ask Gurbash questions.
Please.
Yeah. Gurbash, we actually met a few months ago and been talking, and
inspired me to start a blog.
Gurbash actually, he's given us some great pieces to publish on the site. We actually also did a great interview with him as well. That's on the site as well. I think a great question that some people overlook when they start a business, WhatsApp just sold for $19 billion. And obviously everybody's looking at it as like, all right, these guys won, everything's great, it was an easy journey for them.
Actually not.
Huh?
It's actually not an easy journey.
It's not an easy journey at all. And I think the biggest misconception is that it seems like an easy journey. It's like walking into a gym and seeing a trainer do 1,000 pull-ups, and it looks very easy, but when you try to do it, you can't even do 5 pull-ups. So I think just speaking on the journey and giving people the understanding of, hey, if you're going to start a business, it's a lot. There's more dark days than there are brighter days. And I'm sure these guys, maybe the value that they sold for was quite high, but I'm sure they've had their ups and downs, and mostly downs, to get to where they are. So I think touching on that would be a great thing for everybody.
So one of the other founders is Jan Koum, and he actually and his family came from Ukraine, and they lived on food stamps. So I think he actually signed his $19 billion deal to get acquired at the place where they actually got the food stamps. So I mean, that's a different life than the life he's going to have now as being worth $6.5 billion. But the thing that you got to remind yourself on is never compare anyone else's journey to yours. Because at the end of the day, you're not trying to imitate anyone, right? And, if it wasn't this, a year and a half ago was Instagram, right? Because Instagram was only around for a year and it got bought for $1 billion or whatever, right? So people were like creating all these mimic Instagram apps hoping to get picked up. You can't create a copycat in the hopes of success, right? And you cannot compare someone else's journey to yours. And you also got to realize that, there's also a unicorn story, right? WhatsApp is a unicorn story, right? That's not what traditional business is. Traditional businesses are about profit and loss. Traditional businesses are about the old-fashioned way of doing business, right? And that itself is the philosophy everybody should go after, right? And if you end up getting the unicorn by product of that, then you got in luck. But do not compare anyone else's journey, and don't try to chase a unicorn because they don't exist most of the time.
Great.
So you talked a lot about really pursuing your dreams diligently and really going after things and really working hard and kind of refusing to accept failure. But you also talked a little bit about failing fast. In your experience, how do you know when it's time to fail?
So there's two words. There's emotion and then there's logic, right? And logic is built on intuition. Emotion is built on ego. So you got to go ahead and separate those two, right? And most of the reasons why entrepreneurs fail is because they're emotionally attached to their ego and they're not thinking logically, right? Because if you're thinking logically, you know exactly when it's time to let go. You know exactly when it's time to pivot. You know exactly when it's time to double down. It's calculated, right? But because it's driven by intuition. Most of the other times, it's driven by ego because you don't want to lose because you're attached to this color or you're attached to this app or you're attached to this feature that nobody else gives a shit about, right? But that's where you got to go ahead and separate it. And I've always kind of and it's hard because if you're an entrepreneur, you're passionate, sometimes overly passionate, but you should be passionate about the outcome. You shouldn't be passionate about the process or each detailed process. Does that answer it?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, either David or Craig? Even specifically as it relates to your business, some of the challenges. You're at a very early stage of thinking about raising funding, Craig. David, you're at a more advanced stage. Any questions? And there was some questions here that I didn't get to read, and we'll open it up for everyone to ask questions in case you don't have a mobile device or Twitter. But one of the questions was, how do you feel about VCs taking a big chunk of a young entrepreneur startup? Any questions on anything around financing issues, legal issues, any operational issues that might be helpful not only for you but for the audience as a whole?
Yeah.
I'll ask one. How far do you try to go before raising outside money?
So I say this openly, even in Silicon Valley, and people hate me for it, but I hate all VCs. And mainly because they don't do anything. They don't do shit. They claim to go ahead and give you X, Y, Z in order to get X, but some of them are the dumbest people on the planet. And I'm serious. They've never operationally ran a business before. They've never know what it feels like to be in the trenches. So what you got to disconnect is the aura or the brand that sometimes people get caught up with only one thing. actually two things. Number one is, where's the money? What am I going to get out of it? And the terms of it. That's it. Ignore everything else, because chances are they're not going to add any value.
How far do you try to bootstrap before getting into that, though? Do you try to go a long time, grow as organically as long as possible, and then take the money from a position of strength, or do you say, let's get the money early so we can grow faster, or something else?
I don't think you always want to be in a position of strength. So one of the things I say in my book is people want what they can't have. So become the thing people want. So let them chase you when you're in a position of power. Don't try to go ahead and chase them when you're in need.
I agree with all of that, because we've gone through the process of talking with VCs and all that stuff, and
They're stupid, right?
they're honestly some of the most dumbest people. I mean, they'll sit there in their suits and pretend like they're smart, but I promise you the value they bring is not that high, aside from the money. I think my question would be, and I think it'd be a great thing for the audience to hear from your perspective. Most people, when, everybody wants to start a business. Everybody on planet Earth wants to have their own business. They want to be the boss. But everybody's excuse is that they don't have the money to do it. So I think the question is, how do you get past that hurdle mentally? Because it's really mental.
I don't think it's money. Money has nothing to do with it.
Mm.
I think it has to do with the innate desire, because money is an excuse.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So if you stop making excuses, you figure out a path to get there at the minimum viable process. Right? So most people just don't want to do it because they consume themselves with failure so much on what they can't do that they don't figure out the ways of how they can do something. Right? That comes down to kind of like the bridge between philosophy and optics. Right? And I actually think they kind of merge in the middle, because you got to have a certain philosophy. And if that philosophy is that I'm going to do something, then you figure out a way to get there, right? If I was 16 years old and I could start a company and create it to be worth $40 million, guess what? I didn't get that much money. I started off with $5,000 selling used printers at a flea market, right? So I figured out the way to get to point A to get to my end destination. So if you don't make any excuses, money is never the excuse.
I agree.
And again, I think what's particularly insightful about this is the question that they have for startups getting started, hearing the advice from G's experience.
Well, I think one thing just to note that is a common difference between a real entrepreneur and a dreamer is a real entrepreneur kind of figures out, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to figure it out at all costs. A dreamer, and there's I think 99% of the world is in this category, and there's 1% in this category, and that 99% is actually the ones that says, I have a great idea. I need to find the money for it, right? Ideas do not make money. And that's what people need to realize, is that no, you can have the most brilliant idea in the world. That's not going to make you a billionaire.
I'll throw one out there. So we've gotten some occasional hints at or full-on early acquisition offers, and sometimes it's very tempting when you've been working on something for maybe a year or 8 months, and someone's interested in throwing a little bit of real cash your way. What kind of logic or calculus would you do to think about, is it better to take my ball and go home, or keep pressing on and maybe never end up in a position like this again?
I think it depends on at what stage in life you are. I was 18. I was given an offer, $40 million or keep riding it. I said, I'll take the $40 million. So, same thing. I got, at 25, I had an opportunity to go ahead and get acquired. I chose that route. This time around, I'm not doing it for that. I'm actually taking the company the full way I can. So I'm not looking for a financial outcome. I don't need it. I never did before, right? I never did it for the money, but it depends on the situation you're personally on, and that is really where your intuition comes in.
The question about partners. What is your advice when it comes to partners? Because I know many people feel different ways about this, so it'd be good to hear your perspective.
I think partners is kind of just like selling. And a CEO is probably the best sales guy. So you got to have three things: conviction, confidence, and charm.
Conviction, confidence, and charm. Okay. Craig?
I'll throw one more out there. In the vein of partners and people around you generally, how do you know who to surround yourself with, especially when your startup starts to get a little traction or a little bit of press or a little bit of having something cool? People immediately kind of start flocking to you, and some of them you can tell are dangerous, and some of them you can tell are like great people. But how do you go around about figuring out who you want to keep next to you as either your closest partners, your allies, your strategic partners, things like that?
That's another thing that I think you got to be comfortable with on your own, and your intuition tells you. I'm an open book, I believe in. I don't care if anybody knows what I'm trying to do, or tries to copy me, because I'm not worried about 1.0. I'm already on 3.0 in my head, right? So the more you can get out there and be more comfortable and get out of your comfort zone and share the story, the more press you'll get, the more coverage you'll get, the more opportunities you'll get. And there's also an art to PR that people don't understand, right? That you have to be able to achieve. The press wants to write not what you tell them, but they want to write what they don't know, right? And you got to give them a reason to feed that. So there's an art to that. There's an art to partnerships. There's an art to wanting to sell your company. They're all different phases of the evolution of it. And this is why sometimes entrepreneurs fail, or they end up getting replaced by CEOs, is because they are only good at one thing. They're good at product, or they're good at sales, or they're good at marketing. But then the company hits the next level of maturity in its process, and they're just not up for it. So conviction, confidence, charm.